Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this webinar. It's important to remember that this week covered the Menstrual Hygiene Day, which was on Tuesday. And this is an excellent prompt from us all to remember that there is a global challenge for 500 million women and girls without access to what they need to manage their periods safely, hygienically, and without shame. Many great initiatives are taking place around the world to provide access to good quality menstrual products, in educating both children and adults, and campaigns to change negative social norms. At BSI, our work has focused on how organisations of any shape and size can support their people to cope with menstruation, menstrual health, and menopause in the workplace. All of this with a view to enable individuals to remain active in their work for as long as they want to, rather than being dictated to by natural events that can very often be quite challenging. That is why, with numerous stakeholders involved, we developed a new standard published in 2013 on this very subject. And as with all our standards, they have a number, and the number for this standard is BS 30416. My name is Anne Hayes, and I'm the Sector and Standards Development Director at BSI and your host for today, and have had the huge pleasure of getting involved with our team on developing the standard and now encouraging its use. It is a tool to enable organisations to consider how they can improve work life for their people dealing with menstrual health and menopause challenges. Today, I'm joined by a fantastic panel of speakers. It is important to note that none of us up here are medical practitioners, but that we are people who are experts in the non-medical changes that can be considered by us all. The speakers will introduce themselves, but very quickly, we're starting off with Dr. Maria Tomlinson from the University of Sheffield, who will tackle the myths around this subject. Maria will be asking you to participate in polls, so please do contribute. Darren Dupree from Unison will cover the role men have in providing support and awareness. Alicia Page from Bloody Good Employers will look at how organisations should approach the policies they have or they should have in place. And finally, our double act with Electra Dottin and Maxine Fletcher talking about their experience at Oxford Brookes. Our aim is to get all of that talking done and have 15 minutes at the end for your questions. So finally, for me, some housekeeping points. Unfortunately, you can't talk to us in person today. However, we welcome your questions and we will attempt to cover as many of those as possible at the end. But we will also follow up post the webinar. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact the BS team via the Q&A function. And finally, you will be sent a survey after this webinar, which we would hugely appreciate you completing. And if relevant at that time, on submitting your survey, please request your CPD certificate. So without further delay, I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Maria Tomlinson. Maria, over to you.
Thank you very much for that, Anne. So as Anne said, we're going to be starting the session today with some polls to see what you know about kind of myths and facts and needs around menstruation and menopause in the workplace. So we could get the polls up, please. Okay, so basically, what I will do is I will read out the questions once at a time, and they're all questions that are linked to the standard. So if you already read the standard, then congratulations, you're probably going to get the answers to these correctly. So I'll read them one at a time, and then you'll have the opportunity to click truth or myth. So the first statement is, everybody is talking about menstruation. The workplace does not need to create an open and inclusive culture. So is that true or myth? Correct. So 96% have said that it's a myth. Brilliant. Of course, we are talking about menstruation even more than ever before. And especially if we compare with 10 years ago, we're far more open about the subject. But of course, there is still much stigma and a lot of people still don't feel comfortable talking about menstruation. So it's really important that workplaces create an inclusive culture. Excellent. Right, let's go on to our next question. So, truth or myth? Everybody's experiences of menstruation are the same. So let's see what you all put. Hooray! 100% correct. Absolutely. Every single person's experience of menstruation is different. So every employee's experience will be a bit different. Some employees might have menstrual health issues. Others might have menstrual experiences that are very easy. Great. Next question, please. So menstrual pain is not that bad, and people who say it is have low pain thresholds. Is this a truth or a myth? Right, let's see the answer. Yes, absolutely. So some people are very, very fortunate and have no menstrual pain whatsoever. But there are some people who have really strong menstrual pain, such as endometriosis, that makes it very difficult for them sometimes to come into work or to perform at their best. Great. Next question, please. Menopause is much worse than menstruation. There is no support required for menstruation. Truth or myth? Let's see what everyone said. Excellent. Great job, everyone. Absolutely. So, of course, everyone's experiences of menopause and menstruation are completely different. But of course, there is so much that workplaces can do to support women and other people who menstruate. So that's what we're going to be going through today. So I think it's now time for my section. So thank you so much for your participation, everybody. So what I'm going to be talking about today is a little bit about how workplaces can create inclusive cultures around menstruation. So briefly, my background is I'm a researcher. I'm a lecturer in public communication and gender at the University of Sheffield, and I've done research about menstruation and young people's experiences of menstruation. So I will draw on that a little bit when I was leading the committee and co-writing the standard. So if I can change the slide. Ah, fantastic. So for my research, briefly, I spoke to menstrual activists across the UK from lots of fantastic organisations, including Bloody Good Period, who are represented here today. And I also spoke to teenagers in school. And what this research has shown is that social media has really reduced the stigma around menstruation and has encouraged young people to speak more openly about it. There are more mixed gender conversations between boys and girls in schools happening more than ever before, which has been fantastic to see. But unfortunately, as school education currently is not comprehensive enough, still often, despite the curriculum changes, young people are still learning primarily just about the biology. They're not really learning about lived experiences. They're not really kind of learning as much as they want to about pain and how to manage it. They are relying on social media for information. And this is true of adults as well. So many adults within your workplaces, if they have questions about menstruation, will be turning to Google or to social media to find the answer. And of course, the problem with this is, as my research has shown, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation around menstruation in the media. So it's really important that workplaces have access to accurate information because this can help inclusion as well. And I wanted to add that, there's fantastic male allies out there, and there's lots of men that are really keen to be able to talk about these issues and support women and others who menstruate as well. So the boys that I spoke to in my research said they really wanted to learn about menstruation too, but they weren't quite sure how to support girls. So they wished that their curriculum had taught them that. But those that knew the most had actually learned about menstruation in other contexts. So they'd ignore posts on social media that were just about menstruation, but if there was a comedian talking about another subject and menstruation came up, they remembered that. Or they remembered footballers giving away period products or raising money. And they remembered videos in which girls had talked about how to study effectively for exams and had mentioned their period. So all the findings are going to be available by the end of the year in my book, which will be open access. So you'll be able to find out more there. But for now, I want to share some kind of tips from this research and other research I've done about endometriosis and how they can be applied to the workplace. So to create a really inclusive workplace, I think the most important thing you can do is actually ask your employees what they want. What are they, do a baseline. The standard will help you with that. It kind of gives you instructions on how to build all of this into your existing policy. So do a baseline review, see what the situation is at the moment, and then ask your employees how they could be better supported, because the needs of your employees might be different from employees in other organizations. And as well, another thing you can do is to talk about menstruation in a inclusive and open and non-stigmatizing way. So simple things like using language such as menstrual products rather than sanitary products, because the word sanitary has implications that the person that uses them isn't clean and needs to be sanitized. And the importance as well for providing products in all sorts of toilets, including gender neutral toilets, which will also support your trans and non-binary employees who menstruate. There's plenty of training and toolkits out there that you can access as well. And of course, recognizing that menstruation is a different experience for everyone, and that line managers don't assume that something that helps one person or one employee is going to necessarily help another one. And a really key way to approach that is thinking about intersectionality, because someone's experience of menstruation isn't just influenced by their gender, but it can be influenced by their culture. So it can be influenced by the communities in which they live, their family environment. It can be influenced by their sexuality, sexual orientation. It can be influenced by their disability. So, for example, a woman in a wheelchair, she may struggle to use a menstrual product bin in an accessible toilet if she can't use her feet and it's got a pedal in it. So that's the kind of thing that might go missed. But if you speak to all your employees, that's something someone in a wheelchair would probably bring up. So what the standard's really good for is the fact that we have spoken in there about intersectionality. We've explained what it means, how you can apply it to your workplace, how you can apply it to your menstrual health policy. So all the characteristics I've already mentioned are in there, and you can read a little bit more about them. And really importantly, of course, we recognise that every single workplace is different. So some employees, for example, will be in offices, but others will be in mobile positions. So for instance, a police officer, if she's out and about, she'll need to access toilets that aren't in the office. So she may have need a pack of products with her, say to take into the police van or something like that. Obviously, PPE is something that can be adjusted as well. And of course, you have to think about whether employees are kind of stood all day. They might have different needs from those sitting down, and think about the temperature and etc. of the environment. So a few more actions that you can take once you've kind of considered the workplace, what the needs are, and kind of approached it from an intersectional perspective. So think about kind of how you can make menstruation more visible in the workplace, but not necessarily kind of having a lot of effort to do that. So something as simple as putting up posters saying there's free products somewhere, or putting up a poster to say that you have a menstruation champion or someone in the workplace, just makes it more visible and normalizes it as something that can be spoken about in the workplace. And it's something that employees can receive support with if they would like to. Workplace champions, as well, as I mentioned, they're a really great way of making menstruation more visible and having a specific person that your employees can talk to. So you may, for example, have a workplace champion who has really good knowledge of equality, diversity and inclusion, and gender kind of beyond women, about knowing about trans and non-binary people too. They could be a great advocate. Even putting it onto internal newsletters is quite helpful, because again, it's just normalizing it. Workshops with expert speakers as well. And I think one thing that works really well is kind of, rather than having something that's completely focused on menstruation, which is a great thing to do, but making sure it's kind of here and there in other kind of health initiatives. So for instance, talking about premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is a menstrual health condition that makes you feel very depressed and low. Talking about that in kind of broader mental health spaces kind of normalize discussion about that too, shows it's an important aspect of mental health, so you can bring it in there. And signposting to external websites is really helpful, especially make sure they're evidence-based and accurate ones as well and reliable. We have some examples in the standard that you can use. And as well, linking it to awareness days like Black History Month and Pride, for example. And I have here on the slide some quotes from the wonderful young people, one of which I'll read out. And one of them said, "Discussion leads to difference eventually." And I think that really encapsulates how you can create a really inclusive workplace environment just by talking and being more open about it and making it more visible. So before I move on to our next speaker, I want to talk a little bit more about how we can engage men in conversations about menstruation. If we want to create an inclusive workplace, we must include men within these conversations, because if men don't feel comfortable to talk about menstruation, or if they don't feel knowledgeable enough, we can't effectively break all of the stigma around menstruation. So, if you said make bite-sized videos available to everyone, men will see those. If there are events that you're running, again, around like potentially mental health or well-being that men are going to be there at, and including menstruation within that is a good way to make it more accessible. As one of the young people in my study said, he said, you need to give men a reason to want to listen. And he said, if you tell me why menstruation is important to me and what I can do to help, then I'm going to listen. And then again, including menstruation in broader wellbeing policies is a really great way to engage men. We also have tips in the standard on sensitive conversations with line managers, so making sure male line managers are really confident talk about these issues, and just generally showing men how this is knowledge that is valued to them and how menstrual health initiatives can help them, for example, around mental health. Including them in those conversations is really good for them too. So before I pass on to the amazing Darren, who is himself a male ally, I just want to finish by reading a quote from one of the young men in my study. He said, "Let's reduce the stigma and shame of menstruation. As it becomes more open, that's what will really reduce the stigma, won't it? Once you're free to talk about periods, it won't be seen as an awkward topic." So now I will pass on to Darren Dupre.
Well, good afternoon all. My name is Darren Dupre and I'm Head of Local Government at the trade union Unison Cymru Wales. And trade unions, I'm pleased to say, have been workplace allies for over 175 years now. So what I'm not going to be doing in my short presentation is spraying around any detailed insights around menstruation at work, because we've got some incredible experts who can do that far better than I can. But what I'd rather do in the time that I have is to give a call to action for men around allyship. So today my call is about how we can all, men and women, working together, help create a new modern workplace that will support employees who menstruate in whatever career they may have, in the safe knowledge that it's going to create a kinder, safer workplace for men too. You know that there are many definitions of male allyship, very often defined by kindly souls, often also promoting their tea drinking habits on LinkedIn. All are useful, but I have yet to find a more succinct definition than by one of the greatest public sector chief executives in Wales, certainly in my generation, than Tracy Myhill, who told me, and who definitely knows her audience, and I'm just having a little bit of struggle being able to move my slide onto the next one. And could you put me on to the next one, please? There we are. So, I need you to be an ally because I can't, and because we're in nice company, do whatever miracles on my own. And if anybody wants to learn more about any more Tracyisms, please do Google her. She's an absolutely amazing person. But that cut across directly to me in terms of knowing your audience, and I was on board straight away. Could you put me on to the next slide, please? Thank you. In this photo, you see two boys in about 1974 without a care in the world. and was about the only time, according to my parents, that my younger brother, in blue, was not trying to punch me. As much as I would not change the world much as I speak 50 years later, as a male leader now, I had zero preparation, whether for relationships or in the workplace, to be a male ally around menstruation and menstrual health. Dr. Maria Tomlinson, you've just heard from, has done some astonishing work in this space, and all I would say is certainly to men, it's never too early to learn in an age-appropriate way about women and girls' health, and as I can testify, it's certainly never too late to learn either. So please, men, you don't need to be experts. I'm certainly not, and the standard can really, really help you. If I could pop on to the next one, please. So on the 26th of October 2017, the Wales TUC, which is the trade union umbrella body within Wales, invited me to the launch of their groundbreaking menopause toolkit at the Senedd, which is the National Parliament of Wales. That launch day was probably the most profound event I've ever attended as a trade union representative. In fact, I call it my light bulb moment, where I finally understood that women's health is not a women's issue, as it has always been told to me, but that it was a workplace and workplace justice issue. And what was really, really helpful in how to get me engaged was the presentation spoke my language, both as a man and a trade union representative. And it set me on a journey to talk to employers I worked with about taking a partnership approach to workplace support and outcomes on women's health rather than just policies, which, as important as they can be, sometimes are just left on a shelf gathering dust. So 10 years ago, as a society, we nailed mental health as a taboo in most workplaces. And this standard nails the last remaining workplace taboo. So I cannot overstress the importance of all men turning up to any opportunity to learn and understand how they can be part of the solution and not the problem, which is the physical design as well as the cultural design of workplaces, which have generally and historically been designed for and for the benefit of men. If we go to the next slide, please. For men, being menstrual aware and supportive will make us kinder and better managers, partners, husbands, brothers, fathers, cousins, colleagues, friends, human beings. But it doesn't require you to be an expert. But if being kind, compassionate, an active listener, and supportive is in your arsenal, you are cooking on gas as an ally, my friends. The brilliantly researched standard guides employers, large and small, including those without trade unions, HR or wellbeing departments, on how to create and sustain safe, smart, welcoming and caring workplaces for all employees who menstruate. And with all sorts of fabulous, non-multitasking, plain English guidance to help you, it's perfect for us men as well. And for the bean counters, it's absolutely free to download. So there's now no excuse to not being a workplace ally. If I could go to the next slide, please. So creating and sustaining modern world-class workplaces is a process and not an event. In a tight labour market where employees now have some choice where and who they work for, this standard now becomes a compelling opportunity for employers who want to be a destination of choice for the best talent for men and for women. And for all partners of employees who menstruate, we all need to recognise that this can impact on you too, in all parts of your life, both at home and in your relationships and in work. That is why education, awareness and workplace support for menstruation and menstrual health needs to be spread far and wide. And that is why it's also so important that our workplace campaigns and the British Standard reach out to all employees and not just those at the top who traditionally get the benefit of executive business coaching. And one final keep up for men, we need to stop calling menstruation a women's issue. Just as equal pay, maternity rights and freedom from workplace harassment and misogyny are not so-called women's issues, neither is menstrual guidance, awareness and support. It's a workplace justice issue for us all, and that should include us all. And if I could just go to my final slide, please. I just wanted to leave you with this lovely quote from the incredible Dr. Nighat Arif in her equally incredible book, The Knowledge, which I would heartily recommend for all parents, including if you've got boys or girls. It's a wonderful a wonderful quote for men who want to be workplace allies and allies in general. But how important it is that we talk to other men. It's a really, really sad indictment, I think, of our society that so many men will only listen if other men are prepared to stand up and support women and speak up for women. And hopefully over the next few years that will change. But until that changes, men, if you're an ally and you carry a candle, be sure to pass it on to the next person. Turn up, stand up, keep up, and let's all keep this candle lit and burning bright. I would now like to pass on to my fab colleague, Alicia, who will pick up the next piece.
Thanks, Darren. That was great. Thank you so much for that. Hi, everybody. My name's Alicia Page. My pronouns are she, they, and I am a director at Bloody Good Employers. There we go. I can control the slides. That's a good start. So just to tell you a bit about me and us and who we are. So Bloody Good Employers is a social enterprise. We have been operating for about 2.5 years, and we are revolutionising the way that people think about menstrual and gender equity at work, whilst donating all of our profit to help get period products and education to refugees, asylum seekers, and those living in poverty across the UK. So we're part of the charity Bloody Good Period, and we donate all of our profit to support the work that we do there as a charity. In more detail, so over the last 2.5 years, we've worked with just under 50 employers to improve their support and inclusivity around menstrual health. And we do this through our Bloody Good Employers accreditation programme, through workshops and talks, and we help get period products into the workplace. And like the other people on this panel, I was part of the panel that put together the standard that you can download via the chat. So we've heard already from the brilliant Dr. Maria Tomlinson about culture, also some cover of communications from there. We've heard about male allyship. All of our work covers these areas, but today I'm going to be focusing specifically on policies and what that should look like. So there's a whole section in the guide about policies, and I'm going to be speaking to some of those points today and building on them from our experience with our work with employers. So the way I thought I would do this, so I speak to people about menstrual health and policies every single day, most of the day. And so some of the common approaches that I see when it comes to policies are, number one, that there's nothing written in policy around menstrual health. I'd say that's probably the most common approach. Number two, there's a menopause policy, but no mentions of periods and the menstrual cycle. So we've got quite a unique scenario here in the UK where menopause has been popularised, which is really great to see. And lots of employers are showing a good commitment to supporting people with menopause, but that hasn't been extended to periods and the rest of menstrual health. Then the third common approach or thing that I get asked about is menstrual leave, which can look different, but often looks like women are entitled to X number of days off per month or per year. So I'm going to speak about each of these in detail and some of the things to consider before moving on to what good looks like when it comes to policies. So nothing written in policy. So it's true that for smaller organisations, cultural inclusivity can be very impactful. That's the same for bigger organisations as well. But it is still important for policies to be inclusive of menstrual health to ensure that there is that agreed organisational approach to supporting people with their menstrual health. So we can never assume somebody's individual comfort levels with talking to their manager, raising challenges, speaking with their colleagues about menstrual health at work. So embedding support into policies ensures that there is a formal route to obtaining support. We can do all of the education sessions we want. Ultimately, people will have different comfortability levels with that. So whilst you might have a really strong culture, which is brilliant, it's still important to make sure that you have the policies to support people as well. So a menopause policy only, like I said, demonstrates an important commitment to supporting menstrual health challenges in the workplace, but leaves out the rest of periods in the menstrual cycle. It's kind of doing things a little bit backwards, because we're educating about the end of menstruation without educating about the whole cycle and everything that leads up to it. So there's risk that this further is perpetuating shame and stigma around periods. And also thinking about the power element here. By solely focusing on menopause, we risk alienating the experience of younger employees, likely those with less power and influence, to get the support that they need. So as boards and senior leadership are getting more gender diverse, there's a link between menopause being higher up the agenda, which is absolutely fundamental and really important, but it is also important to extend that to the rest of menstrual health as well. And now onto the topic of menstrual leave, which is a really largely talked about topic. What this can look like can vary, but generally it looks like allowing people to take time off due to challenges with their menstrual health. So this is encouraged, absolutely. We believe that there should be time for people to take off if they are having challenges with their menstrual health, but really that should also be the case for people taking time off for a whole host of other reasons. Menstrual leave cannot be the only solution. So similar to what Maria was talking about at the beginning, you know, it's really important to understand the needs of your employees. Everybody said that they felt that it was everybody said that it was a myth that everybody experiences menstruation the same. That's really positive to see. So that's one of the reasons why having just menstrual leave as a solution by itself is a plaster fix over a deeper wound. It risks segregating and isolating women and people who menstruate. And also many people do not want or need leave. So by offering that as the only solution, you're not actually making the workplace more inclusive, you're actually excluding people from it. So then what does good look like? So we absolutely need to understand the needs and experiences of your colleagues in your specific context. So here at Bloody Good Employers, we work with the likes of, on the one side, Copperfield, the breast cancer charity, so a small team, versus Network Rail, 40,000 staff members working in really different circumstances. You know, not everybody is office-based. Some people work from home. We've got people working out in public-facing roles. So what the solutions and what supports looks like is going to be very, very different based on your context. So it's really important to understand the experiences of your people, which is why the first thing that we do when we work with an employer is we do a staff survey to really understand that. We need to recognise that there are many factors that can impact how an employee can best be supported, and that this is likely to change over time. So this support needs to be varied rather than focusing on a single fits-all solution. We need to embed menstrual health conditions into core policies that we already have. So this is a really interesting one. So I speak with many people who have a separate menopause policy or a period policy or a menstrual health policy, and that's really powerful and can work in lots of contexts. But actually, when we think about sustainability and the link to diversity and inclusion and what our support should look like in the future, if you have really strong core policies like a D&I policy, a performance management policy, absence policy, flexible working policy, then building a focus on menstrual health into those policies specifically can be more sustainable moving forward. And it means that you're not kind of segregating this from the rest of the workplace's experience. Policies need to be accessible and user friendly. So having your core policies that, you know, are traditional style policy documents, because they need to be, is good, but having separate guides maybe around menstrual health, periods, menopause specifically, is a really good way to make sure that people can go to quick access for the support that they need and find the correct policies for them. Both managers and line reports need to be trained on how policies can support, so that that's embedded into culture, and there needs to be proactive support and comms from senior leadership so that people know that they're supported from a leadership perspective. And then just a final note that policies are important, but their impact is heavily dependent on education and a supportive culture. So I just wanted to bring to life an experience that somebody shared as part of our research. And this is something that we see very regularly. I don't take sick leave for menstrual issues. I use annual leave when I need to, probably about 5 to 8 days a year. I feel a bit ashamed of this because I should be braver about my periods. So we consistently hear reports of people not being able to talk to their manager and unfortunately using their annual leave, which is really valuable time, to take time off around their menstrual health because they can't get that support in the workplace. And that is everything from me. Thank you very much. If you want to get in touch, then you can do so via the QR codes on the screen. I'll now pass over to Maxine and Electra. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alicia. Thanks everybody. It's great to be here with you today to talk about the Oxford Brookes experience of working with the standard. And I think some of the things that we've been experiencing at Brookes is going to really resonate with what the previous speakers have been saying. We're going to introduce ourselves, do a little bit of a double act as we take you through our work so far and highlight some of the things that we've done and some of the issues we've encountered along the way. So my name's Maxine Fletcher. I'm one of 4 heads of school in the Faculty of Health and Life Sciences, and my background is in social work, mainly child protection services, and I'm a registered social worker with Social Work England. I've worked at the university for 20 years and I'm responsible for running a number of academic programs within the faculty, and I'm also faculty lead for fitness to practice for our pre-reg health, allied health and social work programs, as well as leading on the university's menopause and menstrual equity work.
And hi everyone, I'm Electra Dotton. I'm an Oxford Brookes alumna and I've been working at Brookes since 2021 as an executive office assistant within our health and life sciences department. I'm also the business development officer for our continued professional development programs. I've been assisting on our menopause in the workplace and menstrual equity work by leading on our branding and awareness raising campaigns. I'm going to pass you over to Max and she's going to tell you a little bit more about Oxford Brookes.
Yeah, so most of you are probably familiar with the type of universities we have in the UK. As an employer, we would describe Oxford Brookes as a middle-sized university, so around 17,000 students, around 4,000 staff, split fairly equally between academic staff and professional services staff. We're in the middle of the country. We're a mid-tariff university as far as the league tables are concerned. We're what we call post-92, so we're a university that has a history of being initially an art college and then a polytechnic when we were all polytechnics before we became universities. We've got a city-based campus in Oxford. We've obviously got some very powerful competition down the road, but actually what we do is we work very collaboratively with the University of Oxford on a number of things, and that would include some of the things we've been doing around the implementation of the standard. We're a university with a diverse population of both staff and students. We're also an open and community-facing university, and what that means is our campuses are available to members of the community to use. So we have dental and medical services open to the public, shops and sporting facilities. And members of the public can use our social spaces, and so in undertaking work around menopause in the workplace and menstrual equity, we needed to be sure that we were working to support 3 intersecting groups: the staff, the students and the local community. Next slide, please.
So how did we learn about the standards? We first encountered the standards in February 2023 when the lead standard development manager reached out to us because we were hosting a menopause in the workplace conference in April 2023. They reached out to us and hoped that we can consult on the menstruation, menstrual health and menopause in the workplace standard. We saw this as a great opportunity and they wanted to use this standard to kickstart a change in culture across UK businesses. Before the standards were publicised in May 2023, our main focus was menopause in the workplace, but because of the standards framework, we started expanding our approach to look at menstrual health. So we approached our Vice Chancellor's group to find out what we could do to embed the standard within the university. Next slide, please.
So a lot of what we were doing was very much around what we call the Athena Swan Charter, and some people will be aware of that. It's a gender equality charter that's located within higher education work, and it gave us, because we wanted to focus on menopause in the workplace, a strategic ambition, which I think is important organisationally, to have that strategic platform or foundation to shape the work that you do. Through the work, we became aware, as the lecturer said, of the BSI and the standard, and at a menopause in the workplace conference, we were able to showcase some of our efforts, our early efforts to raise awareness and put in support services for staff. So the sorts of things that we were doing initially, and this speaks to what we were talking about earlier in terms of going first with menopause initiatives and then perhaps beginning to develop menstrual equity initiatives on the back of that. We started with a menopause cafe. We had both online cafes and face-to-face cafes. We had an online platform called Menopause Talk Point, a chat forum for staff. We developed a good practice guide to sit alongside existing policies on staff wellbeing and leave and other things that we've already mentioned today. So we wanted it to be something that was developing the good practice that we felt we already had, but highlighting menopause and menstrual equity. We acquired a toolkit from an external organisation called HEMPIC to provide support to line managers when talking to their staff about menopause. And because we're a university, we have ongoing research in both menopause and menstrual equity, including a pilot project that offers work-based exercise programs for perimenopausal staff. So the work that we did on menopause really provided a foundation for and directly informed the approach that we then took to the more recent menstrual equity work, and was definitely leveraged by the adoption of the standard. Next slide.
So the story so far, after we got the correct permissions of our Vice Chancellors group to embed the standard within the university, we started reviewing our existing policies and procedures related to menstrual health. We soon discovered that there wasn't much, but what we did discover is that our student union had done some work around supplying free period product vending machines for the student body due to the cost of living crisis. This brought us on to collaborate and expand on their existing work, starting the Oxford Brookes University Menstrual Equity Project, which wasn't just to benefit students, but for staff and the wider community. We launched our Menstrual Equity Project this year by holding a menstrual equity fair in April. So what does menstrual equity mean to us? Everyone has the right to affordable, accessible and safety of menstrual products, as well as the right to be educated around menstruation, raising awareness about menstrual health and alleviating the stigma around periods. Next slide, please. We've had to take specific action when trying to keep in line with our university's guiding principles and the BSI standard, and one of the actions we took was partnering with Time of the Month, TOTM, who offers sustainable menstrual products to businesses. This was in keeping with the standard by abiding to 5.2 physical aspect of work, provide easy and free access to menstrual projects, and our university's deep commitment to sustainability. Additional to this, we created a menstrual equity website and a menopause in the workplace website, created vinyl stickers with a QR code to go in all our bathrooms across our sites that would lead us to our menstrual equity period product location map, where when you scan the QR code and open the map, you can easily find the location of where our free period products are. We've also joined hands with the charity group All Yours, who supply period products to those in need, by creating a donation system within Oxford Brookes University, where 50% of the products donated get distributed into our care cupboards, and the other 50% of the products go to All Yours and get distributed in Swindon and the South Oxfordshire area. This isn't to say that we didn't have any unexpected issues. When relaunching this project, it was mostly aimed at students, but we had to make sure that it was inclusive to our staff and the wider community. So we came up with the strapline, menstrual equity for the whole community. The second unexpected issue we encountered started with our collaboration with the union, trying to figure out how much work had previously been done. Because after the student union installed their free vents, the project went quiet and the issues arose because there was no awareness raising, so students were not aware of the free vents that were available on site. There was no monitoring of the free vents, so we were unaware how much they were used, the costs, and there was no evaluation, which made it extremely difficult for us to approach our central university teams for further financing and resources. But what we did learn from these challenges is how important it is to have a marketing strategy to raise awareness of this initiative and to have a system in place to be able to track the products being used, the cost, and how important it will be to evaluate our work when the time comes. Next slide, please.
Okay, just in terms of some challenges, some further challenges we encountered as an employer along the way have been to do with having strategic buy-in from senior management. That wasn't a huge challenge in our organisation because there was already buy-in. I think the work that we'd done in relation to menopause in the workplace was a platform that they understood what we were doing and they could see that we were building on existing work. Again, the standard was an important lever to allow us to do that. One of the challenges was around, because it's a reasonably large organisation, looking in all the nooks and crannies to see what had already been done, checking that people's expectations were, we were aligning with people's expectations of what support looked like in relation to menstrual equity. Obviously, there are financial challenges, and anybody who's reading the newspapers knows the higher education sector is challenged really at the moment, and so we need to make sure that there's a good business case for this. And one of the challenges is around maintaining rolling awareness. Obviously, we have a community of students who come and go, and so it's really important that we regularly resource time to update staff and students as to what's going on and what's available for them. Next slide.
So what are our next steps? We're very much still in our journey at Oxford Brookes University, but one of the steps we'll be doing is updating our menopause in the workplace good practice guidance to include menstrual health by using the BSI standard as a guide. We'll be reaching out to our academic student administration to support students with exceptional circumstances around menstrual health, and we'll continue our ongoing awareness raising efforts around menstrual equity. September and January are our student intake months, so we'll focus on these, and March and May and October are national international awareness months such as International Women's Day, Menstrual Hygiene Day and Menopause Awareness Month.
So in conclusion, I hope our very short tour about what we've been doing at Brookes has given you some idea about what it looks like when the BSI standards hit the ground. We found it an incredibly useful tool to drive forward these initiatives. We're really grateful to the BSI for their support in working with us on these projects. Thank you very much. And I'm going to hand back to Anne for the Q&A.
Wow, what well, thank you so much. What an amazing group of presentations, and the experience of Oxford Brookes is just incredible, and I'm so grateful to you all for being so open with your experience. If I can ask all the panelists to come back on camera, we have had some questions come in, and actually just one specifically to aim at Maxine and Electra to start with. Just, did you know if there are any other universities that are doing the same thing, or are you quite unique?
Absolutely not. No, I'm very pleased to say there's all sorts of things going on around the country at different universities, and we are sort of sharing and borrowing from each other's experiences. And there are some key people who are doing research into menopause, particularly, and menstrual equity in the workplace. And the two things do go really nicely hand in hand. So we've got colleagues around the country that we're really beginning to understand what this type of work looks like in universities.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. So I've got a few questions here, and I just thought I'd start off with Maria. Sorry to jump onto you straight away, but just sort of really thinking about how we help team members understand more and feel supported, because obviously in the research you've done, you did a lot about sort of young people and where they were coming back, where they're coming from, but just wondered if you had any view on how sort of team members in organizations, how we make sure they feel included, and what we can do to make them feel supported.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said in my presentation, the most important thing is to ensure that you've consulted with your employees to know exactly what they want and how they can feel best included. I think some of the examples we've just seen from Oxford Brookes are incredible. The fact that you've put stickers everywhere that have QR codes that lead people to this information is wonderful. It's so inclusive, and it gives people the option to actually find out more for themselves. And as well, I'd also recommend looking at the standard for how to have sensitive conversation, and the importance, again, you've spoken about Oxford Brookes, how you've kind of integrated menstruation into awareness days. I think that's great. And perhaps as well, giving staff an opportunity, that those that really want to share their experiences and see that as a form of advocacy, to give them an opportunity potentially to have short videos about them. So for example, University of Sheffield, sometimes they highlight a particular work of researchers and they make a video about us and put it on the website, and it makes you feel like you're doing a small part of advocacy, and that can be really empowering. So kind of amplifying the voices of your employees and of a diverse group of your employees as well, I think really helps, and ensuring that at all levels have support and support that's tailored to them.
Yeah, that is one of the questions that we had about sort of different levels. And I know it was mentioned a couple of times, but it is very easy. I think it was Alicia who mentioned it, but I may be wrong, but it just sort of it's very easy for people at top of organizations to get the support and to have the mentoring and the coaching to deal with it. But actually it's about everybody in an organization feeling that. So really, really important. So good point. Alicia, I wanted to come to you because we've had a few questions in around policies. Some of them we've seen before, but we had an HR manager sort of ask us, how do they get their organisation to buy into doing this sort of work? Have you got any thoughts on that about, what metrics they should be putting down, how they should be gathering that business case? Because that's another question we've been asked about, how you create a business case around this.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that very much it's a hidden problem, especially when it comes to menstruation and menstrual health. So it can be really hard when you're starting from zero to know how to build that case. And unfortunately, as we know, when it comes to business cases, there are things like wanting to know how much money this is going to save us, like how this is going to impact productivity and all of those sorts of metrics. Whereas we would hope and would love to see a world where, because it's the right thing to do, was the case that you could put forward and then things could be supported. But it's really about, so some advice that I would give is in terms of who to loop into this conversation. So I think definitely trying to get a senior leadership who can sponsor this and be involved early on is really important. Then also thinking about how you're going to uncover what is a hidden issue. How are you actually going to know the scale of the problem and the experiences of your employees? So surveys are a really good way to do that. Speaking to people who work in recruitment and comms as well, because there are links to retention, attracting people into your workplace. And then from a comms perspective, it is a great thing to be talking about externally, the work that you're doing. So figuring out, if you were to completely transform how your workplace supports people with their menstrual health, what stakeholders would be interested in that change, and pitching to them the different things that are relevant to them that would help their cause, essentially. But I think what I would also do is have a look at research that's out there. So I think the guide itself, the standard, or the guide, not standard, itself has lots of useful information in there. But also when it does come to that kind of tangible business case, there's a report on our website, so Bloody Good Employers report, that actually shows the experiences of people, so you can pull stats from that. There was a great piece of research that got done by In-Kind Direct a few months ago that gave us the cost of days work lost due to period inequity to businesses every single year in the UK, which is £3.25 billion. So it's about bringing together the different stakeholders that would be interested in this work. So that's leadership, recruitment, HR, you're already in HR, comms, and thinking of what it is that appeals to them, finding out what the issues are. So a survey is a really great way to do that. And then pitching that. I do actually have a template proposal document that can help with conversations like this. So yeah, please do feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to talk you through that and share it with you.
Thank you. That's brilliant. Thank you. Great answer. Thank you. Darren, I loved the phrase that you used, and probably use a lot, about workplace justice. I thought that was just such a strong phrase about what we're trying to do here with all of this work. But one of the questions we were asked directly for you is sort of what were your top 3 things to engage with men and to create them as male allies? And I know that you did talk about that a little bit more, but if you were just to bullet point them, just 3 things, what would they be, your top 3?
Cool. Well, first of all, just before I just preempt that, in a single sentence, my approach to life is very much like an approach that lots of communication experts will say on how to try and engage with the currently disengaged, and that is, don't ever tell people what you want to tell them. Tell them what they want to hear, and that very often will then sort of like cut through some of the terminology and the various other difficulties. So if I was to say what 3 things would help, encourage men. Education. Unfortunately, we live in a society where in the early 2000s we were dealing with literacy and numeracy issues in the workplace, or we're talking about mental health, or we then moved on to menopause, and we're now absolutely banging the drum around menstrual support. It's an indictment of our society that we're now having to do this through the workplace rather than through what should be more traditional means. So education and appropriate engagement around what are we talking about. All the evidence that we've had in the trade union movement is certainly in a menopause aspect that women tell us that they're as prepared for menopause as they were for periods in the trades. And if women don't understand what's happening with their own bodies, bugger men are starting from a very, very different sort of position. The second thing that I would just reinforce as well, and I'll do these very quickly, sorry I don't take up too much time, is just reinforcing this is not a women's issue. And that's a lot easier for me to say that to men rather than anybody else for feeling of being mansplaining, but it is a workplace justice issue. And if you give a monkeys, I use my careful language around your daughters or your mum or any other members of your family, your protection around misogyny and harassment and sexism and equal pay and all the rest of it. This fits in exactly with this, with any of your concerns as a bloke around being supportive and protective around the people that you care for. And the final bit is, I think I speak to a lot of men and they are worried about language and terminology and getting stuff wrong. I was very, very lucky on this panel to feel in a safe space where actually, well, Maria was doing it all the time. Well, actually, I would describe it in this way. But if you have a kind and safe space for men to be able to say, I want to be an ally, but occasionally might get the terminology right, I would encourage you to allow men to try and be an ally and help educate us along the way. You know, if you are kind, if you are compassionate, and if you want to be a leader in whatever sphere you do, and you want to have the privilege, and I tell you what, I am the perfect example of male privilege, where women can come and talk to me about things which they may not even talk to their husbands about. That should be a really important weapon in your arsenal as a good, compassionate, modern leader, which attracts men and women into your workplace. Because I tell you what, you'll be a fabulous person for men to work for as well.
That's really a really great answer, Darren, and actually probably applies to everybody, not just men. Actually, you know, we all could do with a lot of that. Maxine and Electra, somebody has asked us if you could just quickly mention the name of the charity for the donation of the products. Again, it got missed, so do you mind just shouting that out once more?
Yeah, so the charity group we're working with is All Yours.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you very much. I don't know whether there's one final sentence you'd each like to give to help people as they go away. We've literally got 2 minutes before we go, but actually you've answered so many questions in what you've presented already today. But I just wondered if there was one sort of thing that you would ask that people take away from this, to take away as their action. We've got, you know, 200 people on the webinar. We've got a lot of people who will pick it up afterwards. We have an opportunity to encourage people to make a difference. So if you had one line, what would that be? And I'm going to hold you to one line. Maria, you can go first. I'm going, just to give you a clue, I'm going Maria, Darren, Maxine, Electra and Alicia, because that's the order you're appearing on my screen.
It's really hard to summarize it in one sentence, but I guess I would say that it concerns everyone in the workplace, and menstruation and menopause policy isn't just important for those that are directly affected, but is also good for those who are indirectly affected as well and affected by similar health issues and concerns.
Brilliant. Thank you, Maria. Darren?
Simply, if you have a trade union anywhere within your organisation, help them. We are the X factor or the Heineken factor or whatever you want to call it, in terms of helping leverage, especially male voices.
Oh, that's a brilliant tip. Yes, thank you, Darren. Maxine?
I would say if you're thinking about the balance between staff well-being and the performance of your organisation, consider very carefully the cost of not doing it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Electra.
I would say have a visual aspect if you can. So with Brooks, we created a brand identity for menopause and menstrual equity, and just having lanyards and badges helps foster an open communication. I've had staff come up to the line manager say, oh, they're wearing a menstrual equity badge. They'll feel more comfortable having that conversation, knowing that they're an ally and that the organisation can have those conversations.
Great, thank you very much. And Alicia, sorry to be last, but off you go.
I'll keep it short. Don't hide your tampon at your sleeve when you go to the toilet.
Oh, thank you very much. I can't thank you all enough for the time you've given today. I think you've been truly inspirational. It's been a pleasure to work with you and to watch this standard develop, and thank you again. Thank you to all those who've listened. Please fill in the questionnaire, and we will endeavour to answer any of the outstanding questions and send those out with the other information. So thank you, and we'll close there.